That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, it's another episode of the slot versus wide analysis. Today we're going to break it down, the biggest matchup upgrades out wide to help you set your fantasy lineups. All this and more starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. That's right, folks. It's feeling frisky today. Ben showed off a little shoulder to get you guys going for the weekend. It's week 7, baby. We're officially a third of the way through the fantasy football season. It's been fun. It's been a roller coaster. Hope all your fantasy lineups are perfect, no injuries, and you're all 6-0. But if you're not, we're here to break down some fun matchup upgrades today using our slot versus wide tool over on Razzball.com. Before I do, I just want to say hello to Ben Wasley. By the way, if you haven't followed Ben Wasley, I heard he's a really good fellow. Knows what he's talking about. Go follow him at Fantasy First Down. And go follow him across the board at Fantasy First Down. He's got a bunch of stuff. He's got a website. He's got everything. Ben, what's going on, man?
Look, I just woke up, if I'm completely honest, and I look like I just woke up, but I feel ready to go. Like, I had a good sleep. I woke up and I'm like, I came out of the bed and I was on fire. My feet hit the ground and I was like, let's go. Let's talk fantasy. I'm ready to go. And it's really hot here, so sleeves are not really an option. Just feel honored that I actually am wearing a shirt.
If you were going full topless, we would have had to cancel the show. But you know what? I'm glad you did at least half. We'll go with it from here. And by the way, we're super excited. It's a wake and bake. Your version of the wake and bake. You wake and you bake the fantasy football. By the way, we don't condone smoking marijuana, or do we? It's legal now, people. Get over yourselves. All right. Today we're going to be breaking down some – not here. It's not legal down there.
I believe so.
Oh, geez, Ben, I might have just got you arrested. Imagine the SWAT team comes in crashing through your window. That's all right. Listen, we're going to get you through this right now. We got a couple people in the chat. Epic fail. Always a pleasure. Hey, how you doing? Nick, by the way, we appreciate your patience as we do this journey. We will get to your questions at the end of the episode. We promise you it will be worth the wait. And on top of that, you'll learn a few things about the slot versus wide tool. Jamie is always on this pod. Jamie. Hi, guys. Hey, guys. Hey, Jamie. Always a pleasure. Epic fail. He also wants to kick a report. Epic fail can't wait for Sundays. Epic fail. I mean, I know we talked about how you became like an epic success over the last few weeks, joining the show, being on the show. We love you. But geez, the lack of just relaxing and waiting on Sunday mornings. But you know what, Epic fail, we'll get you a kicker report. And of course, Ben, congrats on the 14th overall ranker out of 190 on the pros, fantasy pros this week. So you're at 14th overall, Ben, this week.
Yeah, I dropped down 6 spots. It was a bad week for me. But overall, still a good start to the season. Something to work from. But yeah, going to have those up and down weeks. Bounces around a little bit. But we've got to get back in that top 10.
That we will. And he will. And that's good because honestly, at this point, I'm still trying to figure out weekly rankings. I'll get there. I had some of my better. I'm inside the top 100 now, which is terrible. But at the same time, I started at a very low point. I promise you I'm working it out. We're working it out. Today, we're going to be breaking down some of the top matchup upgrades. If you're not familiar with the slot versus wide tool, shame on you. Just pure shame. But if you don't know what the slot versus wide tool is for whatever reason, it is a fantasy points allowed data that we have created on Razzball for wide receivers to tell you how many fantasy points a defense allows in the slots and out wide. So before we dive into today's show, what I want to do is just show people where you can find that information. Because honestly, I think sometimes we just assume people just know where to hop, skip, and a jump. If you jump over to the Razzball.com, click on that NFL tab. You jump over to the Fantasy Data tab. You click on Defensive Slot versus Wide Points per game allowed, and bam. Now you got fantasy points allowed by defense in the slot versus out wide. This is huge. You might be asking yourself, well, how do I know if my fantasy player scores a lot of points in the slot? Well, we created that as well. You go to Fantasy Data tab, wide receiver fantasy points scored in the slot versus out wide. You do both. You get the information. You figure out which players to start. And if you're not 100% sure, you can always join us on the Sunday Live Start Sit Show for 2 hours before kickoff as we answer all your Start Sit questions every single week on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. All right. Great plugs. Great flow. Let's get into it. So today, obviously, we always expect you to go over to Razzball.com. Check out the data. What we do on the show, though, is we want to try to tell you who has the biggest matchup upgrade based on their early season schedule. It's a unique way that you won't see on the site. It's a way to see, all right, well, maybe guys had really tough early season schedules, and that's why they haven't produced. We're here to break down some of who those players could be and why they might need to be in your lineups this week. Now let's go jump over to the pond. Even though there's different direction over the pond, you got to go over the pond and over another pond. You got to go through multiple ponds to get to Ben. But if you just go to one pond over to London, the Patriots are going to be playing the Jags this week, and the Patriots outside receivers, and we could sit here and probably debate on who those guys are right now with Polk and Boyette, and is that even how you say his name is Boyette? I think, right?
Booty?
Booty. Okay, all right, man, I get it. You're showing some skin today, but let's calm down, all right? So, anyway, and then also Kendrick Bourne. So, Bourne, Booty, Polk. I mean, this is the Polk, Booty, Bourne. There's a way to configure that to make it kind of fun. But anyway, those guys are playing a lot. Of course, you got Douglas man in the slot, also a good matchup against the Jags. Ben, tell us your thoughts here about this matchup. Is there a Patriots wide receiver that you're going to be starting automatically this week?
I do think Demario Douglas is the guy that people are really excited about, which is ironic because he's the one who doesn't have the good matchup this week. But Douglas is the only one that's reliably playing a certain amount of snaps. Now, the problem is he's still only playing in 11 personnel, so you're still getting limited snaps from him. But they're at least the main passing down snaps, and he does seem to be the main target for Drake May, at least through the first game we've seen of Drake May. The problem with the others is that Kendrick Bourne's still coming back from injury, and we don't know how he's going to affect Booty. We do know that he's taking snaps away from Booty. He's taking snaps away from Jalen Polk. Polk played 100% snaps a couple of weeks ago, but ever since Kendrick Bourne's come back, he's starting to lose more snaps. So it does seem to me that there's kind of like a three-man committee on the outside at the moment. And until that really becomes a clear, these are our two starters situation, I don't think he can start any of them.
I agree. And by the way, Jamie, just quick, he tries to tell us it's called Bud A, like the Fonz. Do you know who the Fonz has been by any chance?
Yes. Yes, I do. No, I watched Happy Days.
I don't know what gets down there.
I'm a Henry Winkler fan. I get you. I get you.
So, Bud A. All right. So that's what I think with Jamie. That's how I read it. So it's all good. I'm sorry. I can't assume that everything travels down to Australia these days.
I think that's fair.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Honestly, my thought process here is that I might take a wait and see approach. Number one, you're right about the receiving. By the way, Bourne's their guy. They love Bourne. If he wasn't coming off an injury, he'd be a full-time starter, in my opinion. They're waiting to see him get up to speed. Who does that impact the most? It sounds like to me that Polk is the one that the coach, Gerard Mayo, is kind of like he needs to do a little bit more stuff here and there. And it sounds like Polk might be the one that Bourne eats into a little bit. But honestly, that's just an assumption. We do not know. And I think it's better. And by the way, this is a rookie quarterback traveling overseas. I know the matchup's really good, but it might be a better just to see how it goes. I'm okay throwing caution to the wind here and maybe taking a wait and see first. But that doesn't mean you don't stash these guys. Doesn't mean you don't. By the way, Drake May uses his legs. It's a cheat code. He could be a mobile quarterback who has good arm talent. Maybe the weapons start clicking. Drake May is a guy you could stash on your benches, especially if he goes off this week to give you some confidence. So I'm not saying you don't stash him. Maybe not start him right away. All right, number 2 on the list, and of course this one breaks my heart a little bit, is the Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Bucs this season have faced the 17th toughest, average schedule. This week they have the second best out wide schedule against the Ravens. Now, Mike Evans is dealing with hamstring injury, and he did not practice again today. He might be questionable. Honestly, these things always freak me out. It just takes one wrong step in the wrong direction, and he's out in the first quarter. The question is, if Mike Evans is in, is he automatically in for you, Ben? And if he's out, is there a receiver outside of Godwin you'd be interested this week?
Look, this is going to be a really interesting game, and it's going to have a big effect on fantasy. Firstly, because this game is on Monday Night Football, and that is always an absolute pain for fantasy because it suddenly means that you need to have all your backups lined up in advance. It also means that we don't have the final injury reports yet for Mike Evans. He's still going to practice on Saturday, and that's going to make a big difference to what happens on Monday night. So if Evans is out, all of a sudden this becomes a real mess. We kind of saw last week that Sterling Shepard was the main starter, but that's mainly because Jalen McMillan was still coming back from injury. But now Trey Palmer is also possibly back. And all of a sudden, you've got kind of like 3 guys fighting it out for like 2-ish spots. So I think this could be really messy. I don't really want anyone but Chris Godwin in this situation unless Mike Evans is available. If Mike Evans is available, then yes, give me all the Mike Evans. I think this game's going to be an absolute shootout. I think both guys like Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers are going to be fantastic, but Baker Mayfield should be good. Chris Godwin should be good. Mike Evans should be good. Everyone else, I don't really trust them.
Jalen McMillan is someone where he looked good and then he got hurt. And I'm thinking to myself, like, is he actually back now? Because he's not even listed on the practice. He's not even on the injury report anymore. Man. I almost forgot about Jalen McMillan for a minute. I was like, yeah, all right, Jalen McMillan. He did. Listen, I'm a big Giants fan. Sterling Shepard is a legit player, right? And he just has been dealing with injuries. I think Jalen McMillan, if you're the Mike Evans owner and you want to wait, and Jalen McMillan, someone you want to throw on your roster just to hold, do the old-fashioned auto sub. Honestly, I think this one is going to be a huge game. So I think if you want to do Mike Evans, wait for Monday, wait for the Saturday practice report, of course. This will be recorded on Friday. But yeah, I honestly like McMillan a lot. And if you could stash him on your bench for Mike Evans, do that, because this is a game where you're going to want a piece of it. And honestly, not everything's going to go to Godwin. You got Marlon Humphrey that plays a lot inside out, so that, maybe he's on Godwin a little bit, and maybe that takes away from him, and now you have more opportunities on the outside. So McMillan is definitely someone that I'm gonna check his props this week. I'm actually interested on some Jalen McMillan now we talk about it. All right. Number 3, the Carolina Panthers. Now, of course, we can't have nice things, apparently, Ben, because, of course, Deontay Johnson is also dealing with injury now, and we're not even 100% sure. But, hey, maybe this opens up an opportunity for Xavier Legette, who started off the season kind of not playing a lot, and then he really hit his stride. Now he's kind of on the field a lot here, coming back from injury. Early season schedule for the Panthers was 25th best. So, bottom 10 early season schedule for outside receivers, which is interesting because now they get a top 5 matchup against the Commanders. They have allowed double-digit fantasy points to 2 wide receivers in 3 of 6 games. So even if Deontay Johnson is in, is Xavier Legette someone you're actually interested in starting in a plus matchup?
Maybe. The biggest issue with Legette is he's not really playing full starter snaps at the moment. They're kind of messing around a little bit with their other wide receivers. Johnson's the clear starter, but then Legette's kind of like the main wide receiver too, but Jonathan Mingo's kind of drifting backwards a little bit, and they're using a lot more Jalen Colker, which is a really weird situation. He had one good game in week 5, and then all of a sudden in week 6, he's like the new wide receiver 3, but they're not willing to fully give up on Mingo, and so he's taking some snaps away from Legette. It's a bit of a mess. I mean, obviously starting Johnson. I think Legette's probably, if you're going to start him, this is probably the week, but we only have 2 teams on bye, so you're probably not as desperate as you would be many weeks to go out and definitely start somebody. I think he's an option, but he's kind of like a bottom of the barrel option, and I wouldn't be considering any of the other guys at this stage.
So in 40 dropbacks last week, Legette had 32 routes. Not terrible. Definitely was the number 2, but you're right. Mingo actually started dialing back. He only had 14 routes on 40 dropbacks for Dalton. But at the same time, I think you're right. I think it's the bye week that you're right about the most, though, because there really isn't that many teams on bye. And by the way, guys like Cooper Kupp might be coming back this week, but we do have injuries to Deontay Johnson. So the question is, if Deontay Johnson is out, do you have more confidence as Legette as a wide receiver 3? What's your thoughts about that, Ben?
Yeah, look, if Johnson's out, all of a sudden Legette suddenly becomes a real solid option, kind of like a high wide receiver 3 region, probably. He'd certainly move into that wide receiver 3 conversation. And I think you could even start considering guys like Coker, because I think if Johnson's out, all of a sudden he becomes a clear starter. And Dalton seems to like him. He's gotten a reasonable amount of targets the last couple of weeks. He only had 3 this week, but the week before that, he also looked solid. He had 4 passes for 68 yards as well in week 5. So, I mean, he's a viable, really deep down stash if you're feeling a little bit desperate.
Feeling frisky, folks. Go get yourself Legette there. Show a little Legette. There you go. All right, number 4 out wide matchup upgrade this week is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens, of course, Rashad Bateman. Zay Flowers kind of plays more of a hybrid 50-50 role. Bateman's the main out wide guy. Early season schedule was 22nd. They had the 22nd toughest or 22nd best, which is not really the best. So I guess the 11th worst. I don't know. I got to figure out how I want to say this. But yeah, they were 22nd in strength of schedule. early on. So it's not really been easy. Now they get a really good matchup against the Buccaneers, top 7 matchup. Now, something I thought was interesting about Bateman specifically, I think Zay Flowers, we both say he's in. He's in. You got Jamel Dean, the starting quarterback for the Buccaneers, that might be out in this game. He is questionable, did not practice most of the week. The last 2 weeks for Bateman, 4 for 58 and 1 and 4 for 71. Are you starting to get the feelings for Bateman here? What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like 12 targets the last couple of weeks. Got a touchdown in there as well, going over like 130 odd yards across the last 2 weeks. That's pretty good production. I don't know that it's reliable production, but this week, in what should be an absolute shootout, there's very much some upside here, especially if the Bucs can at least shut down Zay Flowers. Maybe they're forced to go towards Bateman. I mean, it's also potentially possible that they go towards guys like Andrews and Likely. It's not like they don't have any other weapons. It's just that their other weapons aren't wide receivers. So the Ravens do have a whole heap of options, but I feel like Bateman could find himself with some big play targets. It's just a case of whether they hit or not. It's entirely possible he still gets his 4 to 5 targets and only goes for like 10 yards because he just can't rip off a big play. So there's always risk with Bateman, and that's why he'll be ranked a fair bit lower than a lot of these other guys. But if you really want upside and you really need upside, then I do think that Bateman is a viable option.
If you're in a shallower League 10 team, or if you only have like 5 bench spots and Bateman's available, he's not a bad option for the Mike Evans owner. If Mike Evans does get ruled out. So I know it's Monday night is tough, but I like Bateman this week. I mean, the last 2 weeks, I like players who play well in good matchups, because you're like, okay, when they have a good matchup, and this is the type of game where the Bucs have been good on offense, they're going to probably be able to score on the Ravens defense, and that could lead to more scoring. I just like the fact that there could be volume for Lamar Jackson. And honestly, Bateman to me is like one of those guys where if he has a plus matchup, and I feel confident that the other team's going to put up points, they're not going to deal with like a Derrick Henry game where Derrick Henry's getting 25 carries for 150-yard type game, which I don't think the Bucs are that kind of defense. Give me a little love. Okay, I got a little Bateman in my lineups this week. Why not? I'll flex him. Let's get a little flexy. I like it. All right. Number 5. This one is obviously not too much fun, but this is like Justin Jefferson PSA announcement. Hey, welcome back from the bye. You're playing Detroit. They had the 20th. By the way, early season schedule was not good. 23rd strength of schedule for outside receivers. I think that's how I'm going to say it. That went pretty smooth. I'm going to go with that. The Lions are 9th this week out in fantasy points out wide. Addison, by the way, the last time we saw him play pretty well against Green Bay. Honestly, I know Jefferson's an auto start. And probably throw him in a DFS lineup if you can. But is Jordan Addison an auto start in your opinion, Ben?
Yeah, I actually had him in my streamers and stashes article because I did just want to highlight the fact that this is a good opportunity for him. The Vikings will need to pass against the Lions. They can't just rely on Justin Jefferson the whole game. So Jordan Addison should have a sizable role. He returned to his over 90% route count last week, or before the bye, in fact. So there's always a risk with Addison. Addison can be a little bit boom bust to an extent, but there's always touchdown upside, especially in what should be a relatively high scoring game. And I do feel like if they can shut down Jefferson, all of a sudden Addison has a really big game. So I feel good about Addison. He's going to be in that like wide receiver 20 something sort of range. And you're certainly starting him over a heap of other guys that you might be considering. He's definitely my favorite player that we've talked about today. That's not a true locked in starter.
Yeah, last year 4 for 57 and 1 in the one game against Detroit. The other game he only played 38% of snaps. So he did when he was on the field last year. He had a good game, and this year they're humming. Sammy Darnold, by the way, is just making fantasy darling. Justin Jefferson was basically nothing before Sammy D got there. I'm pretty sure. So no worries at all. All right, let's get into some questions. We do want to talk some injuries too that might impact your fantasy lineups, and of course we're going to close the show with Ben Wasley dropping dimes on starts and sits using the slot versus wide. Nick, we got you back here, buddy. Should I trade Ayuk for Waddle, Najigba, or Mooney? Yeah, I don't know. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
I think it really depends on your situation. Ayuk's got the most upside of all those guys. If you get an injury to Debo, or even really an injury to Kittle, all of a sudden Ayuk's going to have a lot more big games. Basically, they've got 4 good weapons, and 2 or 3 of them will hit in a given week. and it just hasn't tended to be Ayuk so far this season. But that doesn't mean it won't be in the future, and that doesn't mean if you get an injury to one of those guys that Ayuk doesn't become more involved. So there's upside there. Having said that, all of those other guys have looked potentially really good. Waddle, I mean, we know about Waddle. I'll let Bobby talk about his Waddle love in a second. But JSN and Mooney, I think, are really interesting. I think Smith-Njigba really only pops off in the right matchups, and he's had a couple of good matchups. But Mooney is a legit weapon, and I do think that he's the only one I consider. I probably don't do it, but if you're really looking for a guy who's going to give you a little bit more pop and a little bit more upside without needing an injury to make it happen, then yeah, I'd do it for Mooney.
So by the way, I did some work for the team here, and I actually created a new tool on rasball.com that I think would be really useful for this question. It's the slot versus wide strength of schedule tool. So what I did is I figured out basically the slot and out wide matchups for the rest of the season, Nick, and I basically said, all right, who has the best and worst rest of season schedule for outside and slot receivers? Now, most of the guys by the way, Mooney is actually very close to a hybrid. He is not strictly out wide. He's actually maybe like 60-40, 55-45 slot versus out wide. So he's kind of a loophole. Njigba is strictly a slot guy. And by the way, Njigba is better in PPR formats. Honestly, he is really the Seahawks passing offense hasn't really taken off like I thought it might under this new pass heavier offense. But he's got a lot of competition with Lockett and Metcalf and has led to a little bit of inconsistency. He does have a nice floor, but hasn't really had many ceiling weeks just yet. And Waddle, really, to be honest with you, if I'm 5-1, 6-0, which I doubt if you're trying to make a trade like this, honestly, Waddle might not be valuable for another month until Tua gets back. I'm not banking on the whole Huntley thing being. And by the way, Tyreek's going to be Tyreek. They got two running backs. I guarantee you they're going to lean into that running game. So I'm not going to trade for Waddle. Mooney, by the way, is the guy. And if you use our slot versus wide tool and you just take a look at top schedules, the Atlanta Falcons have a top schedule rest of season across the board. You have to pretty much scoot all the way down to 25 for the San Francisco. Now, granted, San Francisco's out wide schedule is a little more competitive. It's about league average, but Atlanta across the board does have a much better schedule rest of year. So if you're a team that's 2-4 and you say, I need a little kick in the behind here, I know that the San Francisco 49ers this week have the Chiefs, and then, of course, Mooney and company have the Seattle Seahawks, who we'll talk about in a second, are going to be down multiple cornerbacks this week. Maybe if you want some juice, maybe you make the deal for Mooney. It just doesn't seem like you're getting a lot of value for Ayuk. So don't love it, but I agree with Ben. Mooney's the guy. Use the tool, people. Rest of season, out wide schedule. We do it for the clan. The Rasball. I don't know if I decided to call you guys a clan yet. I don't know. Maybe we'll leave up to a poll what you guys want to be called. All right. Epic fail. I will get to defensive kicker at the end. Sorry, I don't have my spreadsheet open. Let's get through some of this. All eyes on blue. Speaking of wideouts, I'm so split on starting Adams or Debo. Got Neighbors and Godwin play already. So the question is, Devontae Adams, the new Jets, he's got his first matchup this week. Jets are facing, why can't I think off the top of my head now?
Pittsburgh.
Okay. And then Debo, of course, San Francisco has the Kansas City Chiefs. What's your thoughts here, Ben?
I don't trust players who've just been traded. They don't know half of the playbook. They're going to be only out there on half of the snaps, maybe, if things go well for them. So for that reason, I would go with Debo. It's not a good matchup against the Chiefs. The Chiefs have very good cornerbacks and they scheme against wide receivers. But I do still think that with Adams, there's a whole heap of risk there. He will get some targets. They'll definitely have some schemed up looks for him, but he's never going to have a massive game because he's not going to be out there for long enough to have a massive game. He's more likely to have nearly a locked in 4 or 5 receptions for 50 or 60 yards, and you just got to hope he gets a touchdown. Whereas Debo could legitimately have a proper blow-up game because that's always in him. And he might need to run the ball a little bit more because we don't know what's happening with Jordan Mason's shoulder. We don't know whether they really truly trust Garendo or even Patrick Taylor. So Debo might have a little bit more of a role in the run game too.
This is tough. Adams is a loophole, I think, in this analysis because he is joining a team that has a similar playbook where he played for multiple seasons in Green Bay. So it's not like he's going into an offense where he has no idea. And I'm sure some of the terminology. By the way, Hackett was the OC. It's his playbook. Hackett was his OC for 3 years with Aaron Rodgers. So I think that Davante Adams will have a little – like Rodgers is going to be able to say, hey, man, translation, this is what we ran in Green Bay. You know what I mean? So, like, in the huddle, they might say this, this, and this. And then he could look up at him, by the way, the Green Bay playbook was this. And he could be like, oh, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. So maybe there's a little bit of expedited, timeline for Adams. That being said, they're on the road in Pittsburgh, and then San Francisco's at home against the Chiefs. Jeez. I don't know, man. I feel like Davante Adams might just come out swinging. Rodgers wants to throw a touchdown to him. I don't know, but I'm gonna go Debo. You're in a good situation here with Neighbors and again Godwin too. So I'm gonna go with safe bet and go Debo. But man, I think that Adams is gonna be fine this week. I think he's gonna do some stuff here. Hey, my bet Tyler, by the way. Tyler, always welcome back. Me and Tyler had a huge dust up a few weeks ago. It was rough. Me and him were back and forth on Twitter, Facebook, IG. It was wild. And then we realized we're all the same in the end. You know what I mean? We're all just human, and we decided to become best friends. And now he's back on the show. We appreciate you, Tyler. My bench is a mess. Who do I drop? Tracy or Bigsby? I don't think I'm dropping either of them. My bench is Ferguson, Love, Bigsby, Tracy, Pacheco. I'm 5-1, so I want to keep Pacheco. I don't think you can drop these guys. It depends on who your tight end is and your quarterback. Man, the only one that makes some sense, if you're not starting Bigsby, maybe it's Bigsby, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Ben?
I mean, this is a weird one. Why is Love on your bench? Who's your starter? Your starter must be amazing if Jordan Love's on your bench. And if Jordan Love's on your bench, then you probably don't need him potentially. You could probably even trade him away. But then you're just going to have someone else on your bench. Bigsby versus Tracy is interesting. I do think that Tracy's the more likely of the two to get a true lead role. There has been a lot of talk. There was certainly a report that's come out just within the last couple of hours that Tracy is still going to be heavily involved, even with Devin Singletary back. And it's not impossible to imagine that eventually Tracy just takes over the early down role and gets like 70% of those early down snaps. And Singletary's more of a receiving back. That's going to have some value, but ultimately, we are still talking about the Giants, and the Giants are, Bobby, close your ears, a little bit trash. So I do think that there's a little bit of risk there. Having said that, Bigsby, even when given the opportunity last week with no EDN, still wasn't used properly. Now, admittedly, they were behind early in the game, and that's not ideal. But they used a lot of Dearness Johnson. You were hoping that Bigsby would have that every down role that it looked like he was trending towards with no EDN in. Instead, they hardly used him. He was hardly on the field as soon as they were trailing. So I do think that he's still going to have a role on early downs. But even 2 weeks ago when EDN was playing, you did see that Bigsby didn't come in until the second drive. EDN's still their starter. Bigsby lacks upside. So I'm going to drop somebody. Probably Bigsby, even though I do still think he's a solid handcuff.
So just to clarify some things, he has to start odd this week. Ferguson is on bye. He has Jalen Hurts as his starting quarterback, so the Hurts has the Giants this week. Now remember, no Dallas Goedert, no left tackle Mailata. Jordan Love, I don't know. That could be a toss-up. It's a league that doesn't trade. Now, is it because you can't trade or people don't want to trade? That's a good question. Because if it's because people don't make trades, fine. I'm sure maybe a 10-team league, everybody has a quarterback. If you're not allowed to trade, different story. It is what it is. But if you think people don't make trades, honestly, sometimes you make a trade if it's a league that you have. Oh yeah, I got you. I know what you mean. My thought process though, if it's just a league that doesn't make a lot of trades and you can actually trade, sometimes you can make a trade that is better for the other team. And it's better for your team, right? Because right now you're going to be dropping one of these guys like like Bigsby or Tracy, and they're going to be a free agent. I guarantee you someone's going to pick them up, and you just gave them a free player instead of packaging one of those guys and Jordan Love to a team that needs a quarterback and trying to upgrade your running back position. Maybe let's say a team like has a James Conner. You take Bigsby and Tracy, and you add Love to that team that doesn't have a quarterback, and you try to trade up to get a guy like Connor, more stable running back, something like that. So worth a shot. Doesn't hurt to ask. People just don't. Well, Tyler, then you know what? Forget those people, right? Just keep being 5-1, my friend. Don't worry about dropping. Drop Bigsby. You're fine. No worries. I don't think you're going to be 6-1 anyway. Who cares? Who cares what the rest of the league's doing as long as you're winning, right? So you're good to go. All right. Let's plant some trees. That's nice. That's nice. By the way, so get green, by the way, people. Let's try to make sure we regrow the earth. Honestly, that'd be fantastic. 10-team PPR league, 1 QB. I have Brees. Drop Ray Davis, D-Hop, or Caleb for him. I have Mahomes.
He meant Braylon Allen. He mentioned it further down.
Okay. He
wants to pick up Braylon
Allen. Yeah, I'm okay dropping D-Hop, to be honest with you. I haven't seen much out of him. Yeah. What's nuts?
I would definitely be picking up Braylon Allen. He is by far my favorite handcuff across the league. I would, if he's available in a single league, I would 100% pick him up, because if you get a Brees Hall injury, all of a sudden you got a top 12 running back, and there aren't many players out there who fit that category. It's kind of like he and Tyler Algier, and that's probably it. So for that reason, I'm definitely picking up Braylon Allen. The only question is who you drop, and I guess it depends on who you need. D-Hop finally started to get some actual starter snaps last week. I don't know why it's taken them so long. He wasn't on the injury report for weeks, and they still weren't using him properly. And then last week, they just started to use him a little bit more. And now Treylon Burks is out. So it is possible that you do see D-Hop finally start to become what we thought he was going to be. So it's really a question of what your starters look like and whether you need them. I don't really want to drop Caleb Williams if I've got Mahomes, because Mahomes is kind of stinking it up. Sorry, don't listen to that. Don't listen to that. But I think I probably still drop D-Hop unless you're a little bit desperate at wide receiver.
Yeah, you know what? And by the way, the number 2 out wide rest of season schedule, drumroll please, Tennessee Titans. So maybe there's something there. By the way, yeah, this is another one where I think, like, you might be able. I know you're probably with the Caleb thing. Mahomes, by the way, it is what it is. His receiving core is just depleted. I mean, he's an NFL stud, but for fantasy football, he's a sum of his parts. I don't think you can expect the guy to be throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns when he's throwing at backups all the time. But anyway, Ray Davis, he's hurt now, and James Cook should be back. It's turf toe, so I don't think Davis has much of a role other than a handcuff for James Cook. So yeah, maybe I say Ray Davis. Drop Ray Davis, pick up Braylon Allen. I think that's the way to go. All right. Mooney plays 30%. By the way, yes, that's true, but his fantasy points he scores is closer to 40 to 50. But you're right. He does play about 30 or so percent of snaps. Epic fail. I promise you we'll get to your kicker questions. The Razzballers. That's okay. We'll take it. The Razzlers. Okay. All right, guys. I like it. The Raz Mafia. Okay, listen. Jamie, we don't want to scare off anybody at this point. You know what I mean? There's a lot of the Raz Maniacs.
Like that.
Razaholics. Little AA. Okay, we'll figure it out. You know, Raz Anonymous. You know, if you will. Raz Warriors. Raz Fanatics. Raz Renegades.
I think it's meant to be.
Renegades. Okay. All right. Barrage?
Brigade.
Dude, I don't even know words. It's fucking crazy. All right. These are good. These are really good. I like it. Let's go. All right. Supersize. I don't even know what that means. Supersize Sinape. I don't do the word things. I'm sorry. Anyway, pick 2, start Bucky Irving, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Brian Thomas this week. What do you got, Ben?
I don't really trust Bucky Irving at the moment, especially after what happened with Sean Tucker, and I think Rashad White's probably going to be back, so it's going to be this awkward 3-man committee situation. So we're kind of down to a Juju versus Brian Thomas. Juju popped up on the injury report, which is a little bit scary as well. I think I'm probably going to lean towards Brian Thomas. It's not the greatest matchup against New England, but...
Pick 2.
Oh, I'm picking 2. Oh, then the wide receivers. Okay, easy.
Yeah, I like Brian Thomas this week against New England. I know that they have Gonzalez, but Gonzalez they haven't really shut down number 1s this year, so I'm not overly concerned. Juju looked good. San Francisco they're on the road in San Francisco, so they're going to have to put up points and keep up. So hopefully that game isn't low scoring. Come on, let's go offenses. But I'm going to go with the two receivers as well. Let's jump down to.
Oh, and I worked out what senpai means. Senpai is like a mentor or like a master kind of.
What was it? Say it one thing. What'd you say?
Senpai. So senpai is in his name. It's like a mentor kind of
Oh, okay.
in Japan.
No disrespect. It's not my thing. Sky Gawasko is
We
our
will be
real
your
our lead
senpai.
guy,
Yeah.
and then Ben Wasley's our backup if we need to. By the way, Tyler, they haven't been a trade in 2 years. Well, you know what, Tyler? It's time to break the rules. Okay, it's time to start a new trend. People are going to look back at this day and say, remember there was a time. People are not going to remember the time before no trades because you started a wave. Okay, start a wave in that league, my friend. Go out there and make a good trade, a trade that other team can't say no to, that makes your team better, their team better, and start a revolution. I'm excited to hear on Sunday what you come back with. All right, I think that's all we pretty much got here, folks. Before we do, we want to make sure we just talk a little bit about some injuries that I think will impact your game. We're a little bit long in the tooth. Seattle Seahawks, by the way, are going to be down 2 outside cornerbacks this week on the road against the Falcons. Ben, does that mean Drake London, Darnell Mooney are in your lineups this week?
Definitely yes.
All right. We also have the Giants going to be down at Dory Jackson. Is a A.J. Brown player props and DFS auto starts this week?
I don't know if he's an auto start because they're also without Jordan Mailata. They might struggle to get the ball down the field because, let's face it, my man from Australia is the best left tackle out there.
I like it. Calling out an Australian. That's what we have you on for. The Texans are going to be down 2 of their defensive backs this week. The Texans are facing the Green Bay Packers, who, by the way, both Watson and Dobbs all played well. Reed has been playing well. What's your thoughts about the Packers receiving core knowing these injuries in the Houston Texans secondary?
I mean, the Packers receivers are a little bit banged up as well, but I think Reed's someone you have to start. Dobbs is an interesting kind of like low-end wide receiver 3. If both Watson and Wicks play, then I'm avoiding them both because we just don't know what the split's going to look like when they're both healthy. We haven't seen them both healthy in over a month. So I think you probably want to avoid Watson and Wicks just for a week just to see what it's going to look like with both of them back.
All right, and by the way, just so everybody knows, too, Jamel Dean, cornerback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is questionable right now. We'll see what Saturday's practice report. If he's out, I like Bateman as more of a rock-solid wide receiver 3 if Jamel Dean is out in that game. All right, Ben, before we close out the show, it's your time to shine, my friend. Give us your starts and sits of the week for the slot versus wide.
Okay, let's go through some guys we haven't talked about yet. So Jamison Williams, he gets a fantastic out-wide matchup against the Vikings. For me, he is a must-start this week. You absolutely have to get him in because the big plays are going to be there. Tank Dell is a very good option with no Nico Collins. He turned his 9 targets into 7 receptions, 57 yards and a touchdown last week. So I like him in this matchup. Wan'Dale Robinson, Bobby will be happy for him. He mentioning a giant. He takes on the Eagles. They've got the 3rd best slot matchup. So even if Malik Neighbors plays, and I think he probably will, Wan'Dale Robinson is still getting a massive amount of targets. In fact, he's got the 2nd most targets in the league so far this season. So Wan'Dale Robinson is a fantastic start in an amazing matchup. If you're feeling a little bit more desperate, we already mentioned Xavier Leggett. He gets even better if Deontay Johnson's out. But I also really like Noah Brown. Terry McLaurin's been the main man with the Commanders going absolutely nuts. But Noah Brown is their wide receiver too. He had a groin injury and that slowed him down. So it's been a little bit unclear seeing his snaps. But he went 8 targets for 58 yards last week. And he's only going to get better. So as desperation starts go, he is one of my favorites. As for sits, Amari Cooper is a guy I'm avoiding. He gets the Titans. They are the toughest out-wide matchup. I also talked about newly acquired players earlier. I don't like them. George Pickens has had his snaps dropping and his routes dropping. He gets the Jets, which is the 2nd toughest matchup. I'm avoiding him. Brandon Ayuk, we talked about a little bit earlier. He gets a tough matchup. I'm avoiding him if I can. And Michael Pittman, injured, terrible matchup against the Dolphins. I don't know what's going on with Michael Pittman, but with Anthony Richardson back, he's just someone I absolutely cannot touch.
All right, let's jump into some. By the way, I forgot. Epic fail. Great job, by the way, calling me out on this one. I will say this: I've been talking up the Commanders kicker, Austin Seibert. He's once again at the top of my metric. Chase McLaughlin is the kicker that I would pick up. The Tampa Bay kicker playing on Monday night. If you need a streamer kicker this week, he's been the guy I go to there as well. Defensively, let's see what I got here. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, trying to find the non-streamer defense. Okay, based on the metric, Colts defense against the Miami Dolphins is interesting. I know that the Colts have been just not great, but at the same time, Miami's offense has been pitiful. I'm a little concerned about that one, but I think it's a high floor play. I'm not expecting Miami's offense to completely light them up this week. Cincinnati Bengals, if you can get your hands on them, always a good matchup against the Cleveland Browns. So I like that one. The Eagles, of course, are probably highly owned, but I think the Giants are an interesting defense. I know Jalen Hurts and company and Barkley scare the shit out of everybody, but no left tackle, no Dallas Goedert. The Giants defense has been legit. They showed it against Joe Burrow and company just last week. So, I think the Giants, if you're looking for a deeper streamers like Commanders, Giants, Bengals, and Colts are probably the last one of that list, but those are some names. Any defenses that pop out to you, Ben?
This is a really interesting one. I think it really depends on the scoring settings for your league. So in some leagues, you get a lot of points for things like sacks and interceptions. And those big play scoring leagues, you don't want a team like the Colts, because the Colts are probably going to shut Miami down, but they had no sacks last week in a good matchup. So I think in this situation, you're probably going to find that it's a low-scoring game, low yardage, but very few sacks and interceptions too. So that kind of limits the upside on the Colts, but as Bobby said, gives them a really good floor. They're my preference out of those three teams, but if your league really benefits sacks and interceptions, maybe you want to revert elsewhere. I would suggest seeing if you can get the Bengals, as Bobby mentioned, or potentially even the Chargers. I think the Chargers could be very good this week in that matchup as well.
We got a couple ones here. Lex, before we close out, this is the last one. Let's play it. By the way, as a reminder, we're not giving up on you guys. We got 2 hour start sit show. We promise you. Come back on Sunday. We'll answer all your start sit questions for 2 straight hours before kickoff. We'll have all the injuries, the weather updates, everything before kickoff. That's the best time to ask us start sit questions. But here we got Cooper, Pittman, McConkey, Bucky, Singletary. Need one wide receiver, one flex, and PPR. What's your thoughts, Ben?
I mean, my thoughts are ew. I get this is a really awkward situation. Like, none of them are terrible, and I reckon you will find that 2 of these guys will pop off. I don't know which. Like, it's going to be one of those things where there is a little bit of randomness to it. Bucky's interesting, but only if Rashad White's out, and I think Rashad White probably plays. Singletary on his first week back, I don't think he can be trusted. So you're kind of left with Amari Cooper, who you'd have to feel like will get some schemed up plays with Josh Allen this week. And you definitely have to start McConkey because it's PPR. I don't trust Pittman at all. So you're kind of stuck with Cooper and McConkey just by process of elimination more than anything else.
Interesting. I think McConkey's the guy I like in his matchup this week. And then the question is, what's the Singletary split going to be? That's going to be interesting. I'm going to go Singletary and McConkey. We'll see how that goes. All right, that's all we got today, folks. Ben, before we close out the show, tell everybody what you got upcoming at Raswell and everywhere where they can find your content.
Okay, so at Rasball, obviously, I do the streamers and stashes article every week. Our stashes are popping off. We have nailed the stashes the last 2 weeks. And last week, we got the quarterback one, the tight end one, and the kicker number 2 as our top streamers. So if you want some, well, maybe not league winning streamers, but certainly game week winning streamers, then go and check out the streamers and stashes article. Slot versus wide, we talked about it today. You can go into the article and go into more detail. If you just want to talk about starts and sits in general, you can go over to my YouTube channel, the Fantasy First Down YouTube channel, and I basically just go through my rankings and talk about the best matchups, talk about where you should be starting people, talking about where the risk is and where the upside is, and potentially some trade opportunities as well. Plus, you can always follow us on all the socials and check out my rankings at ffdfantasyfootball.com. Plus, always go and use the tools on the Rasball website, because I do, and that's why my rankings are really accurate.
Yeah, guys, and by the way, I see a couple questions popped up here. Guys, come join us on Sunday. We apologize. We got to get out of here, but we will be back live Sunday for 2 hours on the Rasball Fantasy YouTube channel. Answer all your start sit questions, we promise. Join us once again, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube and IG. Make sure you jump over to TikTok, and, of course, make sure you jump over to rasball.com as well to see all the great articles from our great writers, our brand-new tools that we have, the slot first wide, everything you need to know to help you set your lineups every single week. Thank you, Ben, for joining us once again. I'm Bobby LaMarco. We are out of here.